Southern California, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Today we have ourselves a jam-packed show, as we have quite a bit to get into in the world of Southern California sports, such as the Chargers having the biggest gong show of their entire franchise. How bad was this loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars, as I'm about to unleash on the Chargers and their misfortune. Also, in better news, how about USC women's basketball? They defeated No.2 Stanford last Sunday. And it doesn't stop there in terms of the world of NCAA collegiate sports in Southern California. LMU, Loyola Marymount, upsetting Gonzaga on the road. How about that? And UCLA men's hoops continues to win as well, as they are still sitting pretty atop the Pac-12. And the Anaheim Ducks, yes, the Anaheim Ducks, there was some good that happened in the Anaheim Ducks. They made some history with Jonathan Gibson last night. All that and more here on the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of the SoCal Supreme Sports Show here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome one, welcome all to another edition of the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Thank you all for joining me on this beautiful Friday afternoon, Friday morning, Friday wherever you are listening from. Either way, you have made your way into episode 120 of the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. And without any further delay, let us begin. But first and foremost, the SoCal Supreme Sports Show would not be where it's at without iSports Radio providing the platform to go live on. iSports Radio can be found on several different social media platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at IE Sports Radio. They also have a website, www.iesportsradio.com, and a Facebook for those that still use it. But for the website, once you go to the top of the website, you click on the link at the top, which is a Patreon link, and once you start donating, it'll start out at $5 a month. This will get you a shout-out from all of our shows, including this one, and higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to IESRU, the podcasting university of IE Sports Radio, which starts tomorrow, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment with Larry B. Because for the past 8 years and counting, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content, ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel, to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, we've been continuing to be by the fans and for the fans. So with your help, we are ready to take the next biggest step. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that is sports. Shout out to our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised Apparel, Key to the Gate, Marcus Losgrit, and a donor that wishes to remain anonymous, but I know who they are. All right, now let's get on into the SoCal sports action. So I think it's high time we rip the Band-Aid off instead of just prolonging the inevitable, as we got to go over what happened on last Saturday with the Chargers and how they had the biggest gong show of their entire franchise. So what transpired Saturday was probably the most unacceptable thing I have witnessed as a fan. I mean, well, first, let's start on how I got to be a fan. So, how I got to be a fan of the Chargers. So, This was back in the mid-2000s when I started getting into the NFL, and honestly, I didn't know who to choose as my team just because the Rams were in St. Louis at the time, the Chargers were in San Diego, and then the other California teams were the Oakland Raiders and the San Francisco 49ers. Now, my grandma, bless her soul, my late grandma, she was a huge Niners fan. She loved Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, and all those other great players from back when the Niners were really good. But I decided to go down the route of becoming a Chargers fan. And it's like, well, the San Diego Chargers are kind of the closest thing to L.A. And I even said on Saturday, it's times like these where I wish the Rams didn't move from L.A. to St. Louis, because that would have made my decision of becoming a Rams fan a little bit more easier, because I would have been avoided all of the pain in being a Chargers fan. But nope, I decided, let's choose the Chargers just because, why not? And at the time, I didn't even know the Rams were in L.A. But now I know, and unfortunately, I have paid the price for being a Chargers fan. So, to the game on Saturday. So, the Chargers obviously started out great. They started out amazing, and they could not have asked for a better start. They picked off Trevor Lawrence 3 times in the first quarter. They led 17-0. Eventually, it grew to 24-0, and then 27-0 after a special teams gaffe from the Jaguars. In total, in the first half, the Chargers picked off Trevor Lawrence 4 times in the first half, and in addition, and 3 of which came from Asante Samuel Jr., and 1 of which came from Drew Tranquill, who I think is going to be a pivotal piece for next season. But more on that later. So the Jags also punted right before the second half, and the Chargers got 1 more possession, and this was probably the turning point of the game. It was 3rd and 1, and I'm just thinking, okay, well, the Chargers are going to probably quarterback sneak it just because Justin Herbert, more often than not, is one of the better quarterback sneakers in the NFL. Instead, the Chargers decided to go with the reverse option as he handed the ball off to Michael Bandy. That I will discuss a little bit later. And then Bandy fumbles it, and fortunately he recovers, but that put the Chargers more behind the 8 ball in terms of punting the ball, as the punt it barely cleared into Jaguars territory, and the Jags got a good return, and eventually that spurred the way for Trevor Lawrence to get the Jaguars' first touchdown of the game, and I thought for a moment, okay, well, we just can't have that happen again. And the reason why Michael Bandy was in the game, because normally he's like a practice squad player. You got to remember from last week, Mike Williams got hurt. He had a lower back injury because Brandon Staley decided to be that type of guy to play all his starters in a meaningless Week 18 game when they know they have the 5 seed locked up. So then Mike Williams got hurt. He was eventually ruled questionable after not logging any days of practice, and then he was ultimately ruled out right before, 2 hours after I went live. So not having Mike Williams really hurt, because now Joshua Palmer, who plays the slot receiver, he has to move into wide receiver too, and then DeAndre Carter, who is normally I wouldn't say their slot receiver guy, but they're like, you know what I mean. I think he's like their flex guy. He normally, and their punt returner, punt and kickoff returner. He had to play wide receiver 3, and he had to play the slot receiver, which that really hurt. And eventually DeAndre Carter did get hurt in the game, and that was what really hurt the Chargers. So the Chargers were without Mike Williams, and now that they were out DeAndre Carter, so they had to bank on Michael Bandy, who has had a couple of good moments, but not too much. And obviously Michael Bandy fumbling shows how much they miss DeAndre Carter. So it was 27-7 at the half, and the Chargers got the ball to start the third quarter. But if you all remember correctly, before Week 17 and 18, when the Chargers scored a third quarter touchdown, the Chargers went all the way from Week 5 down to Week 16, where they scored no third quarter touchdowns. That eventually came back to haunt them in this game as well. As they punted, the Jaguars got the touchdown. Suddenly it's only a 13-point game. Next drive, the Chargers got a field goal, 50-yard field goal from Cameron Dicker, and that was actually his first make from 50 yards plus. So Chargers were back up 16, and then the Jaguars eventually got the touchdown. They actually went for 2, and then they whiffed on it, which I thought that was a relief. But it was at that moment I was thinking, okay, well, the Chargers really got to get their you-know-what together. And what had happened was, I think the Jaguars punted, and then the Chargers went down the field, and then they had a chance for a 40-yard field goal. And Cameron Dicker has been automatic throughout most of the season. The kick looked like it was going to go straight through, and then it just veered to the left, and it's like, uh-oh. It was at that moment I was very concerned. It's like, now I'm extremely concerned. Because then eventually the Jaguars got the touchdown from Trevor Lawrence. I think it was like to Zay Jones. And then after the touchdown, Joey Bosa decides to throw a hissy fit, take off his helmet, throw it onto the ground, and then he got whistled for a unsportsmanlike penalty. Now, he actually received an earlier unsportsmanlike penalty, but that was a taunting one. So the difference between this one was the taunting one and the equipment one was the taunting one, if you get 2 of those, you're out, whereas the unsportsmanlike penalty is you cannot remove your helmet on the field, which he was still on the field before he went to the sideline, and then that was what really mattered. And I understand his frustration. There was a missed false start, and there were missed holding calls against the Jaguars. But in the defense of the Jaguars, there were some illegal contact penalties that were missed on the Chargers, especially with Asante Samuel Jr. So after Bosa's unsportsmanlike penalty where he took off his helmet and threw it onto the ground, instead of going for the extra point, the Jags went for 2, and they eventually got it because Trevor Lawrence is 6'6", and he has a long wingspan. So it was 30-28 at that point, and I'm thinking, okay, well, the Chargers have to get either a touchdown or they just have to bleed the clock to the point where they could just run it out and the Jaguars can't go down the field. It didn't happen. Eventually, the Chargers they went 3 and out, and it was very frustrating. And it was eventually the Jags got into Chargers territory. They knew that a 50-yard field goal isn't guaranteed. So it was 4th and 1, and instead of going with the quarterback sneak, they went with the most gutsiest call out there. They handed off to Travis Etienne. He got the first down and then some, and he eventually got Riley Patterson into the best field goal range possible. And eventually, he booted the game-winning field goal, even when Brandon Staley iced him. And heck, that ball barely cleared the right upright. And even if that was the case, there would have been an offsides call. So that was how the Chargers lost. And I just gotta say, this is probably the worst Chargers loss I've seen. The 31-30 loss is actually the biggest blown lead in their franchise. You all thought that 24-0 against the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football was bad. Well, this one also takes the cake, and it ate it too. And this is actually the 3rd biggest blown playoff lead in NFL history. The others were Kansas City blowing a 28-point lead after being up 38-10 against the Colts back in 2013. And then we have the obvious 33-point blown lead from the Houston Oilers and the Buffalo Bills. So for the Chargers, they made history in the worst way, and it gets worse. The Chargers became the first team to lose a game despite having despite forcing 5 or more turnovers against an opposing team. Teams were 26-0 in the postseason after forcing, I think, 3 or more turnovers, but the Chargers decided, let's just make our own bad history. It was such a bad loss. I basically said this on Twitter, I canceled my plans for this. Granted, my plans were just going to an NCAA men's volleyball match, which I don't think I would have actually enjoyed just because it was being played in the smaller gymnasium due to leaks in the main gymnasium. But it was just so frustrating. And it's like, this was probably the one loss I could not get over, just because I've seen a lot of bad Chargers losses where they've blown leads, especially the 21-point lead the 20-point lead that the Chargers blew back a couple seasons ago. But the fact that they blew this lead in that fashion in the playoffs after they recorded 5 turnovers against the Jaguars, it's disappointing. It really just makes me not want to cheer for this team. But I'm not going to be that guy, and I'm going to stay with this team through thick and thin. But I was very frustrated. I could not sleep a wink after that loss. I was just so mad. I just could not believe it. I was very dissatisfied. I was basically on a Twitter rant. I want to go on a Twitter rampage, but I didn't want to be too unethical. But overall, that was how the Chargers season ended. Now, if the Chargers had lost in close fashion, like if it was a back and forth game, I would have understood that. And I would have just said, the Jaguars are just that good, and apparently Trevor Lawrence has not lost a game whenever he plays a game on Saturday. He went undefeated in his college career on Saturday games. He went undefeated in high school on Saturday games. And now he won his second NFL game on the Saturday. So, honestly, good for Trevor Lawrence. I'm happy for Trevor Lawrence. I'm happy for my friends that are Jaguars fans, even though they just retweeted and posted a lot of memes about the Chargers choking a lead. But I'm very happy for the Jaguars, and all respect goes to them. They earned that game. The Chargers were not the better team. They settled for field goals. They were not aggressive on fourth down like they were in the past. And their defense just basically folded like a deck of cards. It's really frustrating. And again, I'm dissatisfied as a Chargers fan. If I were realistic, if it weren't for the Rams being so bad this year, I would probably root for them going forward. But I made my decision, and I'm still going to root for the Chargers. And that's not what a true fan does. A true fan, obviously, like if you quit a job, you basically are replaced by someone else. But if you quit as a fan, you just can't do that. Obviously, there are going to be other fans that want to replace you, but you just can't do that. It's just not in my DNA, and I just hate that. I would just not. I just feel unclean. And I'd be a part of the San Diego crowd where people would just stop rooting for the Chargers or root against the Chargers or any of that sort. So it's just a frustrating loss. Now, fortunately, this was basically where I said I can no longer bolt up for Brandon Staley and the rest of the Chargers. Fire Brandon Staley, fire Joe Lombardi, hire Sean Payton, fix everything, please. So, after the wild card weekend, I think this was on Tuesday, I basically found out and I got the news that the Chargers are retaining Brandon Staley. Now, obviously, I had mixed feelings about Staley. I mean, yes, I feel he deserves to be fired, but he did turn the team around. Like, the dude, in his first 2 seasons, has led the Chargers to over 500 records. And he led the Chargers to the playoffs this year. Again, his decision-making was just so bad. Whenever he goes for it on fourth down in the most illogical way possible, it backfired. The fact that the dude didn't sit his starters in Week 18, which saw them lose Mike Williams, that backfired too. Oh, and it gets worse when it comes to Brandon Staley's poor decision-making when it came to not sitting his starters in Week 18. Joey Bosa landed on the injury report, but he had a full week of practice. However, whatever groin injury that he had or calf injury that he had, he said after the game, he was playing on half a leg. Now, again, leg injury sustained in the Chargers-Broncos game in Week 18. I wonder why he was playing on half a leg. Maybe if Staley decided to not play his starters in that meaningless Week 18 game against Denver, Joey Bosa wouldn't be playing on half a leg. But instead, Brandon Staley decided not to do that, and now he bit the bullet with losing Mike Williams and with losing not losing Joey Bosa, but not having a 100% Joey Bosa. Keep in mind, Bosa did just come back from IR. So Brandon Staley just really disappointed me. That dude is the biggest disappointment in the NFL playoffs this past week, and I'm just so frustrated at him. The good news is for the Chargers, however, is that they fired Joe Lombardi and they fired quarterbacks coach quarterback's game day coach, Shane Day, who I think is Ryan Day's son or some sort of relationship with Ryan Day. But those two are gone. I'm more happy about Joe Lombardi getting the boot more so than Shane Day, but Joe Lombardi needed to go. The fact that the dude just didn't utilize Austin Eckler, the fact that he forced Justin Herbert to throw 45 passes when they were up 27-0 at the moment, as well as 20-plus in that second half, or 20 points at one point, it's just unacceptable. The clock management was so poor that you basically thought that Joe Lombardi's plays were basically from Madden rookie mode. I'm sorry, but it's the truth, and Joe Lombardi deserved to be fired. And I'm happy he got the boot. And if the Chargers, I said this on Twitter, if the Chargers didn't get rid of Brandon Staley or Joe Lombardi, I could not see myself rooting for the Chargers next year, just because it shows that the Chargers don't care about winning. Their owner is cheap as heck because he decided not to go after Brian Daboll, who led the Giants to their playoff win, or Doug Peterson, who led the Jaguars to their playoff win over the Chargers. So the fact that that basically showed that the Chargers don't care about winning. And again, as a fan, it's just very frustrating. And the fact that they didn't care about winning means that they don't want to see success, and they're just in it for the money, which is basically just greed. But again, they fired Joe Lombardi, which they really have to hit the nail on the head when it comes to getting a good offensive coordinator. And I don't know who are some options. I heard Greg Roman is gone. I heard Matt LaFleur of the Jets is gone. Well, Greg Roman of the Ravens is gone. But Mike LaFleur of the Jets is gone. So either way, the Chargers have a lot of work to do this offseason, and that is pretty much that. Oh, I should also mention, in addition to that bad play calling, the Chargers only had 7 yards of rushing in that second half. And I think they only had 7 designed carries in that second half as well. And 13 of those rushing yards came from Justin Herbert, based on like bootleg plays or just RPO plays. That's just even more unacceptable. It's like 7 yards of rushing. That just proved that Brandon Staley and his play calling is bad. Joe Lombardi as an offensive coordinator is bad. And I feel for Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert is one of the few players I feel bad for just because he said he takes full responsibility of that. It's not all on him. The whole team is basically should take the full blame. Just because the defense, the defense obviously got beat, but again, Herbert basically just said it best. He felt bad for the defense, and he took full responsibility of that, but it's basically a whole team game. Like, he can't just dump the whole responsibility thing on him. So, for Justin Herbert, I felt so bad for him. I even felt worse for him after everyone and their moms basically said Justin Herbert is overrated, Justin Herbert choked, Justin Herbert's Matt Ryan, especially from Emmanuel I Ride the Meat of Tua Tagovailoa Acho and his little Chargers memes and how he says the loss was on Justin Herbert. It was just frustrating. Like, I almost wanted to deactivate my main Twitter account and just have Set Point just active, or at least SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Like, I don't even check the feeds of SoCal Supreme Sports Show and Set Point. I just have them for tweeting out purposes and whatnot. I just mainly check my feed for my main Twitter account, but I digress. But this does not mean Justin Herbert's a bad quarterback. The dude finished second in passing yards at the end of the regular season. And the dude was playing hurt all season. The dude had fractured ribs. The dude was missing his left tackle. The dude was throwing to unknown receivers that I nor everyone has probably never even heard of. He was It was at one point where his number one receiver was Joshua Palmer, and his number two receiver was DeAndre Carter. And the dude basically willed the Chargers to the playoffs. So how can we call Justin Herbert overrated? Maybe if the Chargers can get, like, better options or a healthier O-line or a better offensive coordinator, maybe Justin Herbert wouldn't be so bad, and maybe these people on the internet who doesn't know squat about him, or the Chargers for that matter, could basically just not say that about him. So overall, the loss was just so bad. It was just a tough night for me, and it's like, I've never been more embarrassed to be a Chargers fan. The team just didn't adjust overall, and it made 28-3 look even bad. It made 28-3 look not as bad as it once was. As Davidson Crooks pops up into the chat room, he says, Charger needs to get rid of either Allen or Mike Williams. Both stay injured too much for my liking. So that is actually going to be our next little turning point, or my next little segue. And thank you, Davidson, for basically bringing up that little segue. So that's actually what I found out on a Instagram page. It was Chargers season, and he says the top 5 needs entering free agency and the draft. So the number 1 need was wide receiver. Basically, the Chargers need to draft a good speedy wide receiver, whether it's like a Jordan Addison or that Nixon Igmegba guy from Ohio State. Either way, they need to draft a speedy wide receiver that can get separation from his receiver. I mean, Keenan Allen is a good route runner, and Mike Williams is a good 50-50 ball guy, but it's like, as Davidson said, they both stay injured too much for his liking. And obviously Keenan Allen missed a majority of the season, and Mike Williams missed a majority of the season. But here's the thing. If Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are both on the same field, when the Chargers have both players that start and finish a game together, they're undefeated. They went 4-0 when Mike Williams and Keenan Allen both started and finished a game. Now, I know that's skewering stats right there, but it is truthful. I mean, look at what Dolphins fans say about Tua when he starts and finishes a game. They go undefeated whenever they're practically invincible when Tua starts and finishes a game. Unless they play like the Chargers or the Niners, but I digress. And the Bills. We can't forget about the Buffalo Bills. Anyway, but yeah, that's actually a very good point. And the second thing that the Chargers need entering free agency or the NFL draft is running back. Now, Austin Eckler is a phenomenal guy, but he's not the biggest guy. He's like 5'10", 5'11" on a good day. And yes, he does have some good receiving option. He's also a pretty good receiving option as well. But they need like a bigger like bruiser. Like Joshua Kelly, he improved from his first 2 seasons with the Chargers, but he's not that big guy. Like, he's not like a Josh Jacobs, a Derrick Henry, a Jonathan Taylor, a Christian McCaffrey. So it just wasn't. Like, Joshua Kelly is not bad, but he's not going to be a long-term option. And then the third need that the Chargers needed was edge rusher. Now, this is kind of tough just because they have Khalil Mack, but he's getting up there in age, and the Chargers need to make sure they get like a big bruiser to like get after the quarterback. Like the Jaguars O-line was just bullying Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa altogether. Yes, there were some holding calls, but still, it was muy unacceptable that the Chargers barely or didn't get any pressure. I think Kyle Van Noy had a sack in the second half. Davidson says that the Chargers need to get more depth at the O-line, get a nice young tight end and another depth piece for the pass rush. Well, that too. And the O-line, here's the thing about the O-line. I mean, that's what the Chargers are probably going to have to look at. I mean, if they can get a good O-line, they're probably going to have to draft at O-line for the third straight year. I mean, granted, they need a wide receiver, but knowing them, they're going to draft O-line. They need like a right tackle, a good right tackle. I mean, Rashawn Slater would have been great for this playoff game, but unfortunately, he just wasn't 100%. Now, if the Chargers had won, there would have been a chance that he would have played this week. But since the Chargers are out, no mas. And then the fourth option is a strong safety, which, okay, I kind of understand this. I mean, I understand that they need to get another option to go along with Derwin James and Alohi Gilman, who I thought improved. But that's why you drafted JT Woods. Maybe he's a free safety as opposed to being a strong safety, but it's like, What was the point of drafting JT Woods then? And then the last option that I saw, or the last need that the Chargers needed entering free agency and the draft, courtesy of Chargers season, is depth or defensive depth, which, again, cornerback would be great, though J.C. Jackson is probably slated to return, well, once he fully heals up after his torn ACL and whatnot. And then, obviously, maybe a good edge rusher, a good defensive end. And, yeah, Davidson said another depth for the pass rush, or depth piece for the pass rush. And Davidson is not wrong. I definitely think the Chargers' defense still needs to improve. But here's the thing. When it comes to free agency is that, what are they going to do with Drew Tranquill? I think Drew Tranquill is slated to be a free agent. Do they re-sign him, or do they just let him explore free agency? Or do they just franchise tag him? I don't know if they can tag him, but I don't think they tagged him, in my opinion. But I think Drew Tranquill would be a good piece to bring back, just because he actually performed well. He led the team in tackles this season. He had 2 interceptions, one against Derek Carr and one against Trevor Lawrence. And then he had a few sacks here and there. I think he had 3 or 4 sacks. So I think bringing back Drew Tranquill would be great. But I think drafting a wide receiver would be amazing as well. If they can get Jordan Addison from USC, amazing. And if they can get Jackson Smith Enigma, or whatever his name is, from Ohio State, that would also be great. I wish Brock Bowers was going to be committed to the draft. Then I'd say get him as a tight end. I mean, Gerald Everett did great, and Donald Parham obviously was injury-riddled, but I think having a Brock Bowers type of player would be amazing. That's why I was screaming for the Chargers to get Greg Dulcich. Greg Dulcich was an amazing tight end, but no, they decided to go, they went with JT Woods, and then the Broncos right behind them got Greg Dulcich, and I'm like, gosh freaking dang it. It would have been so awesome to see Dulcich as a Charger. That is a great tight end right there. I think his stock went down after he played one more season with UCLA, whereas he could have just moved on to the draft and had no questions asked, but it is what it is. He actually did have a decent season with Denver, albeit they had so much offensive ineptitude with Russell Wilson, but I digress on that. But yeah, I really think the Chargers need to they have to go all in when it comes to this offseason, just because the Chargers and their quarterback, Justin Herbert, next year is the last year of his rookie contract, and then they have to know what they're going to do with him long term. Are they going to just pay him the big bucks? Because they want him to be a Charger for life, and Justin Herbert said it himself. He wants to be a Charger for life. But they have to basically build around him. Otherwise, he's going to be another Phillip Rivers or Dan Fouts clone. Although Dan Fouts had success with the Chargers, and Phillip Rivers had some success, but no Super Bowl. So, overall, yeah, the Chargers really have to build around Justin Herbert. They have to basically get a good medical staff. They have to. Just because a good medical staff is what really matters most, and it's very underrated. I mean, look at the Chiefs. They have one of the top 3 medical staffs, and even though they have injuries here and there to their receivers and whatnot, they're always contending year in and year out. So, overall, that is basically it for the Chargers. I do know their schedule for next year, as well as the Rams schedule. That's going to be saved till next week, and I guess I'll try to go in depth on what the Chargers need in terms of their draft. I mean, it's going to be more easy for them as opposed to the Rams, who have little to no draft capital. But overall, that's going to basically do it for the NFL. I'm just disappointed. Again, I'm just very disappointed that the Chargers lost. I'm not disappointed in the loss entirely. I'm just disappointed in how they lost. Again, if the Chargers lost a close game, or if they nearly came back and Jacksonville eventually won off a walk-off field goal, I wouldn't be too disappointed. I wouldn't have even been disappointed if with a back and forth game. But the Chargers had the lead. They were up 27-0, and unfortunately they whiffed it. I still think 28-3 is much worse than 27-0 for the Chargers. Just because that's in the Super Bowl. The Falcons were leading in the third quarter over Tom Brady after playing such a great game through 2.5 quarters. And then they let up just because Lord knows what was happening. And they had bad clock management, and Julian Edelman was a thing, and Tom Brady was a thing. So I still think 28-3 is much worse than the Chargers 27-0. But overall, I'm still disappointed, and I'm never gonna really hear the end of this. And tomorrow, when the Jaguars play the Chiefs, it's not gonna be anywhere easy for me. So Davidson says the Rams are in a bad situation right now. Luckily, they didn't give up more draft capital for Brian Burns early in the season. That is a fact right there. Just because they already said F them picks, now the picks are effing back. So, yeah, it is a big fact. Those are big facts right there. And again, for the Rams, they just got to get healthy, and they just basically have to, this is probably their biggest offseason as well, just because I think this could be the last year of their relevancy. And that's actually a perfect segue to go into the Rams. So last week, my boy Marcus Losgray, as I was doing the show, informed me that Sean McVay was going to return as the Rams coach. So what does this mean for the Rams? It means they don't have to go after a head coach. They don't have to go after that search process. But I just think that the Rams need to basically, they have to get everyone healthy, first of all. Second of all, I think they got to focus on the O-line. And third, they basically, are they satisfied with Allen Robinson and Van Jefferson being the wide receiver 2 and 3? Or are they just going to have to go digging deeper into the free agency and draft? Like I don't even know what their cap looks like. I'm just gonna have to go in. I'm gonna go more in depth on that later. But Sean McVay staying is a big plus, and honestly, it's a great decision, and I'm happy for him. I just don't see how he would leave, just because that would be a cheap move to just win a Super Bowl and then after one horrible season, just leave after a big rebuild. I mean, obviously Sean McVay's been through a lot. The dude lost his grandfather. The dude had to deal with injuries to his team. The dude even got drilled by, I think, Bobby Wagner in a game. And the dude has had a lot of draining times. I mean, this offseason, I guess, is good for him, just because now he'll just have a time to basically just reflect and just recharge the batteries, and then once he gets up, then the Rams just got to go back to work. Larry says the Chargers have another chance next season. Yeah, and this offseason is big for them. They have a chance for dubious immortality. Then he goes on to say the Rams. That's another story, LOL. But at least they have their Super Bowl from last year. That is the key right there. That Super Bowl, if they did not win that Super Bowl last year, they would still be the butt of all. They'd probably be the butt of everyone's jokes as much as the Chargers. But at least the Rams have that Super Bowl. And I even said, I think it was the day after the Chargers lost to the Jaguars. I said, if you're reading this, the Rams are still LA's NFL team, not the Chargers. And I guess some people got a good kick out of that. So we'll see about that. And Davidson suggests maybe the Rams should get Robert Woods back. Well, I wouldn't think that would be too bad of an idea. I mean, the poor dude, ever since Odell Beckham came, Robert Woods was shown the door for what was he traded for? Was he just traded for a complimentary pick? I mean, man, I felt so horrible for Robert Woods. And he went from Jared Goff to a little bit of Matthew Stafford to Ryan Tannehill. And this is no offense to the Titans, Davidson, but obviously having Jared Goff or Matthew Stafford would have been a lot better than Tannehill, even though that dude can move a Tana mountain. Oh, yeah, and the Rams got a 6th rounder for Robert Woods. Any chance the Rams could, trade back? I think that would be a good idea. Just trade a 6th rounder back to Tennessee for Robert Woods. I mean, the dude is a Southern California kid at heart. The dude went to Gardena Serra back in his high school days. The dude went to USC, and the dude eventually found his way on to the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, granted, he also played in Buffalo and a few other places, but the dude made his way to to the Rams, and then unfortunately he was shown the door. I think he was injured at the time, and then Odell Beckham Jr. comes in, and it's like, bye, Robert Woods. And I was just basically heartbroken at that. And yes, I blame Todd Downing too, the offensive coordinator for the Titans, or former offensive coordinator for the Titans. He's been shown the door too, and I hope the Chargers do not hire him. All right, but that's probably enough of the NFL for right now. I'll probably get into more offseason needs and musts for the Chargers and the Rams next week. But again, I'm just dissatisfied as a Chargers fan. But Larry said it best: the Chargers have another chance next year. I also did hear that the Chargers players talked with one another, saying they want to keep everybody together. Just because, again, this team, even though they dealt with injuries, this team went 10-7. They had the top wildcard spot, and they were a few tragic mistakes away from actually advancing to the second round, which I think that would have been awesome. But unfortunately, as one content creator said, Dean Spanos and Tom Telesco has kind of made the Chargers, have kind of turned the Chargers into the Clippers of the NFL, which I don't really think that's ultimately true, but it kind of is. Or at least the new age Chargers of the Clippers, at least compared to the Rams. But the Rams don't have the championship pedigree that the Lakers have. But I digress on all of that. All right, so that is that for the NFL portion of the show. Now let's get on into some happier news, such as college basketball. So we're actually going to start with women's basketball. And my goodness, Sunday was what I needed to be cheered up with, as I found out that USC was taking on Stanford. And I wouldn't say I've been harsh on USC women's hoops, but I just said they don't have a standout win like some of their other counterparts do. I mean, they have a winning record, yes, but they just don't have the true breakout wins to make people say, hey, USC is a huge threat in women's basketball. They've come close a couple times against UCLA, but they just could not finish up. That changed on Sunday when USC, unranked, took down No.2 Stanford 55-46. It was just a phenomenal game. USC held Stanford to its lowest point total at that point of its season. And they held Stanford to only 31% field goal range. They only held them to 19% from three-point land. And they forced 14 turnovers against Stanford. And I basically said it best. It was a complete team win for USC women's hoops, and it was definitely their biggest win of the season by far. It's probably their best win in a while, because they haven't really had too many great wins like that. I don't even remember the last time prior when USC upset the No.2 team in the nation. It probably had to have been during the Lisa Leslie days or anything of that sort. But it was just a great win for USC. They also beat Cal a couple days ago, 63-43, but Cal is not as good as Stanford. This win over Stanford is a program changer. Yes, USC is 3-3 in conference play, but that's a huge win, especially since UCLA sadly could not pull out that win over Stanford. But we're not talking about UCLA here. We're talking about USC, and this is a special team right here. And keep in mind, they are getting the #1 recruit next year in Juju Watkins from Sierra Canyon. If USC can play their cards right, they're going to be taking over the NCAA women's basketball scene by storm. Now, I know I'm putting them on a pedestal here, and I know I'm kind of overreacting here, but this is a special win right there. And USC doesn't have too many terrible losses. I mean, their 2 losses against UCLA were by a combined 4 points. Obviously, getting crushed by Oregon speaks to Oregon being an incredible team. And their other loss was to Texas, where they lost by 14, which is not bad, but it is what it is. I mean, Texas, I'm fairly certain Texas is just as good. And yeah, they're 13-6. They're borderline of being ranked in the top 25, and they're contending well in their conference. So that's not ultimately a bad loss. Now, if they lost to the likes of Arizona State, which is having to forfeit games left and right, or they lost to Cal, then we'd be a little bit more concerned for USC. But they don't have too many bad losses, and in my opinion, and I think they're kind of like a good underdog story. But like I said, their schedule does get a little bit tougher. Not this week. This week they're at the Washington schools, but next week when they play Utah and Colorado on the road, now it's going to be a little bit tougher. But if USC women's hoops does pull off a win, especially against Utah, like Colorado, I wouldn't even mind if they do that, but if they pull off at least one upset next week against Colorado or Utah, that would be something. Again, it would show the growth that USC has had, because normally they would be the butt of everyone's jokes, but now they're not. No one's joking about them anymore, and no one is sleeping on them, and it's just a great turnaround. It doesn't show in their Pac-12 conference record, as they're only 3-3, and they're a far 2 games back of Stanford, Utah, and Colorado, but overall they have grown tremendously. And again, their 3 losses were to ranked teams, Oregon and UCLA twice, which they gave UCLA all that they can handle. And I guess we'll give UCLA some love. Their only 2 losses of the season 3 losses of the season are to the likes of Stanford, which they lost. They were in that game for the most part, but unfortunately, Stanford did this thing called adjusting, unlike the Chargers, in the fourth quarter, and they wound up ultimately winning 72-59. But that score is a lot closer than the final score indicates, just because that fourth quarter, Stanford adjusted. Their defense basically swarmed all over UCLA. UCLA's only bad losses to Oregon State, as they lost that one 77-72, which, talk about bad loss, because Oregon State is near the bottom of the Pac-12. So, and then their other loss was to South Carolina, which was number 1 in the nation at the time. That's not too bad of a loss. But for UCLA, they're still in the Pac-12 contention bubble. It's just not as... they have a boxer's chance, but the Pac-12 this year is deep, as there's all but one team with a 500 or better record. It's quite amazing, honestly. I think this is the deepest that the Pac-12 has been. And what's scary is that there are 6 teams that are ranked. And I was thinking USC was going to be ranked as well, but unfortunately they don't want to show love to USC just because they lost to UCLA twice, and then they got curb stomped by Oregon. But overall, USC women's hoops is special this year, and UCLA, they're obviously good as advertised. We'll see what they can do going forward. UCLA is number 9 in the nation, and if they just play their cards right, they could possibly make a push for that Pac-12 championship in the tournament. But we'll see. So that's going to do it for college women's hoops. We got to get into the NCAA men's hoops, and we just got to start off with this. UCLA men's hoops is on fire. They beat Arizona State last night by a score of 74-62. Now, at halftime, it was looking like Arizona State was going to pull off the upset. And I just got to say, shout out to Arizona State. Their fans showed up and showed out. Unfortunately, UCLA, like Stanford women's basketball, they adjusted in the second half, and they turned the tables. But that win over Arizona State is a lot closer than the final score indicates. Like, UCLA had to grind out that win. And That win was probably the most trickiest outside of the USC and Washington State win on this 14-game winning streak. So UCLA is now 2 games ahead of the second best team in the Pac-12, being Arizona State, as they play Arizona on Saturday. Now, Arizona obviously whooped the living you-know-what out of USC last night. Even though Arizona has had its inconsistencies with losing to the likes of Oregon and then Utah, and I want to say they lost to Washington State last week. Or, I'm sorry, not last week, 2 weeks ago. I think this is going to be a tricky game. I think UCLA has to be on its A game, and they can't afford to have off nights. Like, Jaime Jaquez was getting swarmed by that Sun Devil defense. That's the bad news. The good news is that UCLA has other options on their team, like David Singleton, Tiger Campbell. It's quite amazing how deep UCLA men's hoops is. And I may be a USC guy at heart, but you gotta love UCLA and how it remains to be. They remain consistent, and they've only had 2 losses, which they weren't even ultimately bad losses. They lost to Illinois and they lost to Baylor in a tournament, but ever since then, they have not lost ever since. And this UCLA team is starting to become more special by the day. They're 5th in the nation, which I think is quite outstanding. But it's basically going to be all about, can they come up big in the NCAA tournament? Will they be seeded nationally? Will they be a number 1 seed within their region? Time will tell. And can they stay healthy? That is the $1 million question. They have to stay healthy. If they can stay healthy, they're good. And I already talked a little about USC and how they lost. Yeah, it was to be expected. They're on the road. They're playing Arizona. Arizona is a really good team. USC would have had to play perfect basketball. Unfortunately, they did so early on, but unfortunately for them, they just couldn't do so the rest of the way. USC lost that one 81-66. So it shows how good Arizona is, and it's back to the drawing board for USC, which plays Arizona State tomorrow. If they could beat Arizona State, that would be a big win for them, just because that gives them momentum going into Thursday's matchup against UCLA. This time it's going to be at the Galen Center, and we'll see if the Trojans can hand UCLA its first loss of the season in terms of the Pac-12. But that's going to do it for UCLA and USC. Jumping on over to the West Coast Conference, we had a gargantuan upset from last night. We had LMU defeating Gonzaga, number 6 in the nation, 68-67, which was absolutely amazing. But it doesn't end there. LMU made so much history last night, as they actually became the first team out of 76 previous teams to snap Gonzaga's 75-game home winning streak, which was absolutely amazing. That is probably the biggest win of LMU in quite a while. And Cam Shelton was the one that hit the go-ahead jumper, it was a jump shot, even though it looked like a layup. But regardless, he hit the game winner with about 13 seconds left, and LMU just pulled off that win. And Cam Shelton led the way with 27 points. He shot a little under 50% from the field, but overall, the dude was absolutely amazing. And man, LMU defeating Gonzaga. Who would have guessed? I was basically sandbagging on all the SoCal teams, saying, "Oh, well, now that they're in West Coast Conference play, it only gets tougher from here." Well, for LMU, they may not. Their record doesn't show it in the West Coast Conference, but obviously they're the 4th best team in the conference, but they have some decent wins. They beat BYU and they beat Gonzaga. They could be a sneaky good team, or they could be a dark horse to make the big dance. I'm no bracketologist, but I think LMU could, hence the word could, sneak in that tournament if they go fairly deep in the West Coast Conference tournament. I would like to see a SoCal team not named San Diego State or UCLA or USC make the NCAA tournament in men's or women's basketball. Probably men's basketball, because all the other teams such as Pepperdine, San Diego, and as well as a majority of the Big West always get the shaft. But for LMU, that win over Gonzaga was special. It was a historic win, and my goodness, those Lions don't sleep at night. They're always on the prowl. So hats off to LMU. Just a big win for them overall, and I'm very happy for LMU. Unfortunately for San Diego and for Pepperdine, they're not having the greatest time in West Coast Conference play, as San Diego lost to Portland 88-83, and Pepperdine has yet to win a West Coast Conference game. They are sadly bringing up the rear in that West Coast Conference. They're 0-6 in conference play. Yeah, tough times for the Waves, but hey, it's all good. At least we have LMU carrying the load. And then jumping over to the Big West Conference, it's a tight race. So last week I said UC Irvine and UC Santa Barbara have a big game on Monday. Before that, UC Santa Barbara had to play UC Riverside, and to the dismay of Santa Barbara fans, they lost to UC Riverside 74-72. And I said that could be a potential trap game for the Gauchos. And sure enough, Santa Barbara got snared right into that trap. That's the bad news for the Gauchos. The good news for the Gauchos is that on Monday, they handed UC Irvine its first Big West Conference loss, beating them 73-65. I kind of forgot there was a Monday game. I'm not really used to seeing Monday college basketball games. I'm used to seeing the Big West playing on like Friday or Saturday, or Thursday for that matter. Thursday and Saturday, with the exception of a few teams having to play on certain days due to weather purposes. But overall, this Big West Conference in men's basketball is heating up, as your leader in the Big West Conference is UC Riverside at 7-1. Santa Barbara and Irvine are both right behind them at 6-1. Also can't count out Hawaii and Davis, although they're not from Southern California, but I even said don't count out Hawaii just because they were the favorite to win the conference this year. And then the next closest team behind Davis and Hawaii is Fullerton. Yeah, Fullerton all the way down to CSUN. They're not ultimately close, but they still have the tournament, which anything can happen. Look at what Cal State Fullerton did last year. That brings up bad memories, but I digress on that. So definitely keep an eye on that West Coast or Big West Conference, just because that race is getting really tight. So we'll see what happens going forward, and we'll see if UC Irvine, Riverside, or Santa Barbara can break through. But time will tell. There's still plenty of season left, and there's still a conference tournament which could see a potential dark horse emerge. But if I had to guess, I'd probably say Irvine or Santa Barbara will win the tournament. But that's just an early guess. That's not me trying to guarantee it like Charles Barkley would. So closing out college hoops, we have San Diego State that beat Colorado State in overtime on Wednesday, 82-76. Sadly, they lost to New Mexico last Saturday, 76-67. But they were playing the gauntlet last weekend as they played Nevada, which was undefeated in Mountain West Conference play. And then they also played New Mexico, which was still having a great season overall before they lost early in the season. So that loss to New Mexico was actually the Aztecs' first loss, as they are tied with Boise State at 5-1 in the Mountain West Conference. This week for the Aztecs, they play Air Force and Utah State. Well, Air Force on Saturday, and they play Utah State at home on Wednesday. Looking at Air Force and Utah State, they're right smack dab in the middle of the conference, which San Diego State has to be careful. They just can't look that far ahead. That's just not characteristic of them. But either way, I think San Diego State is still having a good year regardless. They do have some decent wins like over Ohio State and UC Irvine and whatnot. But time will tell if the Aztecs will make the big dance or if they can win the conference tournament. But we'll see what happens. All right, so that is basically going to do it for the college hoop scene. We're actually going to take ourselves a quick little break. When we come back, we'll talk NBA, the NHL, and we have a special edition of Dum Dum of the Week. And I also have to give out my Big W award. So keep it locked here. You are listening to the SoCal Supreme Sports Show here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
Hey sports fans, do you like wine? Well, we've got the show for you. This is Let's Wine About Sports, a show where we talk about wine and sports simultaneously. From the classic Cabernet Sauvignon all the way down to the grapes that you've never even heard of before. Oh yeah, we cover it all. And we'll talk about a little bit of sports as well. Football, hockey, collegiate, women's sports, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about it all, and we're going to whine about it all. So join me Monday at 8 p.m. on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Some say that Indiana is just a flyover state. Flatlands and cornfields, barns and country roads. What if I told you Indiana is the crossroads of America? What if I told you in all other states, basketball is just basketball? In Indiana, basketball is life. Crowded high school basketball gyms on a Friday night, and every barn with a basketball rim and a frayed, worn-out net. If you're interested in the heartbeat of America, and if you're interested in sports, if you have Hoosier running through your veins, the Crossroads Pod with Aaron X is made for you. Powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Each and every week, the Crossroad Pod covers all of Indiana sports. The pride of the horseshoe of the Indianapolis Colts. The blue-collar gold swagger of the Indiana Pacers. The relentless pursuit of the sixth banner for the Indiana Hoosiers. The swing of the hammer of the Purdue Boilermakers. The swoop of the Cardinals of Ball State. The summoning of the echoes of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. The growl of the Bulldogs of Butler. The intensity of an Indiana fever. The chop of the Indianapolis Indians. At the Crossroads Pod, if it is Indiana, we've got you covered. More than cornfields. More than country back roads. The Crossroads of America. Join me, Aaron X, every week. It's nothing but net.
Are you a fan of Buffalo sports? Are you thinking of changing loyalties and becoming a Buffalo sports fan? Do you even know where Buffalo is on the map? Did you know Canada is closer to Buffalo than New York City? Welcome to the Buffalo Huddle, every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 4 p.m. Pacific Coast Time on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. I'm your host, Patty Bax. This is a podcast designed for you, the passionate sports fan. I know you love your sports. Who doesn't? I cover Buffalo sports and so much more by bringing in the human elements. I I call it Buffalo Sports with a twist. Join me as we take a journey into the world of Buffalo sports. I guarantee you'll fall in love with Buffalo just like I did. Each week we start with an inspiration, question of the day, a Buffalo fun fact, and our weekly challenge to you, the listener. Come huddle up with me. Every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 4 p.m. Pacific Coast Time for the Buffalo Huddle with Patty Bax on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. As we say in Buffalo, go Bills!
Back with segment number 2 of the SoCal Supreme Sports Show here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely check out all of our amazing shows, such as Let's Whine About DMV Sports with Mike Pat, the Crossroads Pod with Aaron X, and the Buffalo Huddle with Patty Bax. Speaking of the Buffalo Bills, at this point of the NFL playoffs, I basically said on Twitter on the day after the Chargers lost, I could care less about who wins the NFL or the Super Bowl. But I will say, for the time being of the NFL playoffs, I will gladly root for the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills are my team going forward when it comes to these playoffs and these playoffs only. After the Buffalo Bills win the Super Bowl, hopefully they do, but I'm being confident in myself and in the Bills. Hashtag win for DeMar. I will be back to being a Chargers fan. I want to see the Buffalo Bills win a Super Bowl, but that's irrelevant. So now we have to get back on into the Southern California sports action. In 15 days, I just got to make note of this, is the Busch Light Clash, which will be held in the Coliseum, which is basically NASCAR and motorsports and all that. I'll be getting more into that before the season begins, but if you want more in-depth motorsports action, you definitely got to check out the Extra Mile. They will be going live for season 7 of their premiere next Thursday, not yesterday, but this upcoming Thursday, the 26th. Mark it on your calendar. Book it. Anyway, just got to get that out of the way just because NASCAR is being located in SoCal, and I promise y'all I'll try to do my best to try to go in depth on the Busch Clash and whatnot. I'm not going to try to coast through it, but either way, just got to get that note of the Busch Clash out there. All right, so now I'm actually going to get on into the NBA. So now that NFL is done for me, I got to focus more on the NBA. I got to try to get the Lakers and Clippers more love just because now the Chargers and Rams are out of the playoffs. So for the Lakers and Clippers, the Clippers have been struggling, and their former color commentary broadcaster Michael Smith said it best. They had lost a good chunk of their games, and some of their wins, one of which was to the Dallas Mavericks, wasn't even that great, as most of their wins are basically against sub-500 teams, and then most of their losses are to teams that are 10 times better than them, that have winning records. Like this past Wednesday, the Jazz they just stomped on the Clippers, 126-103. And then the Sixers beat the Clippers last Tuesday, 120-110. The Clippers beat the Rockets, which nobody cares about. It's the Houston Rockets. No offense to the Rockets and Rockets fans, but the Rockets aren't going anywhere. And then last Friday, the Clippers lost to the Denver Nuggets 115-103. So, yeah, big oof on the Clippers part. And now they're under 500. The good news is that they're still in the playoff race, which I guess is good. but it's not all that great. I really got to bring up this Michael Smith stat. The Clippers, before the Clippers played the Jazz, he said the Clippers are 23-23. They were 21-15 at one point, but have lost 8 out of their last 10, or had lost 8 out of their last 10, with wins coming against Dallas and Houston, which the Dallas win was good, but the Houston win is not even that great. And he said, digging deeper, the Clippers only have 4 wins against teams with a record of 500 or better. That's how concerned the Clippers and their fans should be, because they're 23-24 right now, but they only have 4 wins over teams that are 500 or better. Yikes! I didn't even know that. But Michael Smith, the former Clippers color commentary guy who did it with Ralph Lawler for many years, this dude is getting the Big W award just because I did not know that. And I'm like, are you kidding me, Clippers? So, and also I know Michael Smith's son, McVay, who is an assistant coach for Long Beach State. So, Michael Smith gets the Big W award. So, yeah, I can't believe that. 4 wins over teams with a record of 500 or better? That's just baffling, if you ask me. And Marcus Lestrade pops up in the chat room. He says, playoff P, LOL. He should not be playoff P. And Marcus, you even said it best. There should be playoff nobody. You cannot give yourself a nickname. You have to earn that nickname. And until playoff P or Paul George wins a ring for the Clips, he cannot be playoff anybody. Okay, but back to the Clippers. After giving Michael Smith the Big W award. So for the Clippers, following their atrocious loss to the Jazz 126-103, the Clippers are back in action tonight as they play the San Antonio Spurs. If the Clippers cannot beat the Spurs, I know it's in San Antonio, but if the Clippers can't beat the Spurs, I feel there's some concern for the Clippers. There should be some concern because you can't just coast through sub-500 teams. And even against sub-500 teams, the Clippers have had their struggles. I remember they needed double overtime to beat the Pistons. They can't just lose games like that or have to go down to the wire against teams below their level. Like, it just can't happen. It just can't happen. And then Sunday, they travel to Dallas to take on the Mavericks. So technically, the Clippers have the Texas two-step this weekend. And then Tuesday, they play the Lakers on the road. And then next Thursday, they welcome the Spurs. And then next Saturday, they play the Atlanta Hawks in the ATL. This is the Clippers' chance to actually get some good wins. The Dallas one looks a little, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's not possible that they win that one. But this is the chance for the Clippers to make up some ground. By the time I do this show next Friday, I want them at the very least, to go 3-1 this week. I want them to be 3-1 this week, and which would basically put their record at 26-25. If they aren't 26-25 by the time next week rolls around, I got to break out my axe. Also, because realistically, the Spurs are in major rebuild mode. The Lakers are a complete train wreck, and the Mavericks, I think that's probably the least winnable game for them realistically. So there's no excuse for the Clippers to try to make up some ground. They have to be 500 or better. 500 or better by the time next week rolls around. And unless, of course, I have to switch my show to like Thursday, I want to see the Clippers at 26-25 next week. Don't you dare disappoint me, Clippers. I will not hold back. Anyway, the good news is for the Clippers is that they're still 8th in the Western Conference. But the bad news is that they're in the play-in mode. They're basically in the territory of play-in mode. So if the season ended today, they would play the Minnesota Timberwolves, which we all remember what happened last year. It was the Pat Beverly revenge game. And then the Clippers would have to play Golden State or OKC should they lose that one. But the play-in game race is pretty tight, and the Clippers are only a half game out of the top 6, or at least number 6 entirely. Now, as for the Lakers, yeah, it's been rough times for the Lakers as well. Man. Wednesday, they lost to the Sacramento Kings 116-111. It was rough, as they actually led early on, and then they let the lead slip through their fingers, and the Kings just got hot late down the stretch. So, yeah. But the Kings are much more improved. Like, it's so shocking to see the Kings doing so much better than anybody. Like, I think the Kings are the biggest surprise team out there, just because they are a walking lolcow in terms of the NBA. On Monday, the Lakers, to no one's surprise, beat the Houston Rockets 140-132. Be thankful that the Rockets played the previous day against the Clippers, because if not, then maybe, just maybe, the Rockets somehow pull off that win. But in that game against the Rockets, LeBron James had 48 points, which had him surpassing the 38,000-point mark. So only 2 players have surpassed 38,000 points. LeBron James and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And Kareem's record is right on LeBron's radar. And realistically, he could break the record this season, as long as he stays healthy and he doesn't have to break any bones while having to carry the lowly Lakers. So, yeah. And Marcus says they have 10 years of first-round picks. LOL. I presume that's the Sacramento Kings, I presume. And not like the Lakers or Clippers, just because pretty sure the Clippers and Lakers don't have that much draft capital. But I digress on that. I'm pretty sure Marcus is referring to the Kings with 10 years of first-round picks. But I could be wrong. And then last Sunday, the Lakers lost to the Philadelphia 76ers 113-112. Again, it was another case of the Lakers had the lead, but it slipped through their fingers just because they unfortunately can't get a shot off. And this was actually the game where LeBron James hit 38,000 and not the previous game. But regardless, LeBron James is over 38,000 and he made history, which is awesome sauce. But in that game against the Rockets, LeBron James, he became one of the few. I think this was his 5th game where he had 40 or more at age 38 or older, surpassing Michael Jordan, which is quite astounding. So LeBron is making history, which has kind of been the only bright spot for the Lakers. But that is basically that for the Lakers recap from last week. Tonight they welcome the Memphis Grizzlies to the Crypto.com arena at 7 p.m. Yeah, that one's going to be a rough ride. Like, the Grizzlies smell fresh meat when it comes to the Lakers. So, if you pick the Lakers to win this game, you're either bold, desperate for money, or you're a diehard Lakers fan. And then on Sunday, the Lakers travel to the Emerald City to take on the Portland Trail Blazers. Tuesday, they welcome, well, I say the word welcome quite loosely because they play the Clippers. Then Wednesday, they welcome the San Antonio Spurs. The next Saturday is the big game. They head down to Beantown to take on the Boston Celtics, which nothing else matters. The Lakers have to win. I don't care what it takes. They have to at least beat the Celtics one time. If not, then I'm going to cry. Because as a Laker fan, nothing else matters except beating the Celtics at least one time. Because if the Lakers get swept in that series, then we're never going to hear the end of it from Celtics fans and Marcus. I'm just saying. I'm not trying to say that to be disrespectful, but it really is true. It really is true. And that Celtics game starts the first of a 5-game road trip. I don't think that's their Grammy road trip, and I don't think they have any more Grammy road trips nowadays, but it is what it is. I don't care. I just call everything a Grammy road trip just because it's Lakers tradition. Anyway, that's going to do it for the NBA portion of the show. The Lakers are two full games back of the final play-in spot, which is a distant 2 games as, yikes, Orama, Lakers. Anyway, so that's that for the NBA portion of the show. Jumping to the NHL, the Ducks actually made history last night. So they beat the Columbus Blue Jackets 5-3. So you're thinking, that's awesome, right? No. That's nowhere near awesome. Just because the Columbus Blue Jackets are just as bad as the Anaheim Ducks. They're now the new worst team in the NHL. And had the Ducks lost, they would have been the new worst team in the NHL. But fortunately for the Ducks, they made history as they actually dug their way out of a 3-goal deficit early on, which, boy, that's a miracle. Normally when the Ducks are down 3-0, it's pretty much game over for them. But the fact that they came back to beat the Columbus Blue Jackets 5-3 on the road is quite astounding. And their win over Columbus was actually quite a special one for 2 reasons. Yes, the Ducks winning last night against Columbus was actually special, as their 5-3 win actually marked the Ducks' 5th multi-goal comeback victory of the year, which ties for the league lead. It also marks the 4th time in club history that the Ducks have rallied from a 3-goal or more deficit down to win on the road, and just the 2nd time on doing so in regulation. And the other time came back on December 2nd, 2018 against the Washington Capitals, where they trailed 5-1, but then won 6-5. So basically, that game resembled 2 things. One, the Ducks have some sort of happiness to play for, or they're giving the Ducks fans, or the few Ducks fans remaining, something to smile at. And 2, it just shows that the Columbus Blue Jackets are a complete gong show, and they're much worse than the Ducks. So that win, while it is historical, it's also hysterical as well. But there was also some other big news for the Anaheim Ducks in terms of that win over Columbus last night, as goalie John Gibson moved into 2nd place on the Ducks' all-time win list, as he now has 174 career wins, which I think is astounding right there. So, again, while this has been a bleak and nightmarish season for the Anaheim Ducks, at least they're making some sort of history. Again, albeit the Columbus Blue Jackets game was more hysterical history, more so than history in a good way. But, again, it's something to somewhat be happy at. So, again, it's not all bad, right? Kind of is, just because it's the Ducks. Anyway, the Ducks also lost to the Philadelphia Flyers on Tuesday, 5-2, and they lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins on Monday, 4-3, which saw them going 0-2 in their Pittsburgh 2-step. And then last Friday, they lost to the New Jersey Devils 6-2. So, outside of that Columbus Blue Jackets win, we haven't had too much to root for for the Ducks. As this Saturday, they are hitting the road to Buffalo to take on the Sabres. Then on Tuesday, they will travel to the Cactus State to take on the Coyotes. Then on Thursday, they travel to the Rocky Mountains to take on the Colorado Avalanche. Then next Saturday, they welcome the Arizona Coyotes to the Honda Center, which I still think it should be known as the Arrowhead Pond. So that's that for the Ducks. Going over to the LA Kings. So the Kings are still 2 points behind the leader of the Pacific Division. However, there are now 2 teams occupying the top spots in the Pacific Division. The Seattle Kraken, which are only in their 2nd year, and the Las Vegas Golden Knights. So the Kings actually had a chance to be part of that echelon where they could have been tied for first in the Pacific Division. But sadly, the Kings lost to the Dallas Stars 4-0. And then they lost to the New Jersey Devils last Saturday 5-2, which is a big oof right there. So it hasn't been ultimately easy for the Kings, but they're still having a better year than most people gave them credit for. I don't think anybody really had them performing this high of a level this season. So Saturday, the Kings head down to the Music City to take on Nashville. That will be a 5 p.m. Pacific start time. Then on Sunday, they head to the Windy City to take on the Blackhawks. Then Tuesday, they head to the City of Brotherly Love to take on the Flyers. Then next Friday, they head to the other Sunshine State to take on the Florida Panthers. Then next Saturday, they have the Tampa Bay Lightning. And then it looks like they have their All-Star break following that. Following the game against the Lightning, as they don't play again till the 11th when they play the Pittsburgh Penguins at the Crypto.com Arena. So that's pretty much that for the Kings. Long story short, the Kings are doing so much better than the Ducks that they're in a different time zone. But hey, it is what it is. Well, the Ducks are in a different time zone. They're like so far behind that they're basically looking at the Kings from Hawaii time, who are in East Coast time. That was probably a bad joke, but what can you do? All right, so that's going to do it for the NHL portion of the show. It looks like I've got a majority of all the topics nailed down. So now we got to get into the Dum Dum of the Week. So the Dum Dum of the Week goes out to people or an organization that does a dumb thing or that does multiple dumb things. No one is safe from the Dum Dum of the Week award except for my teammates at IE Sports Radio. I can never really give them Dum Dum of the Week, but nobody is safe from the Dum Dum of the Week award regardless. Before I get on into the main Dum Dum of the Week, I have to give out the mini Dum Dum of the Week, and for the first time this calendar year, I'm giving myself the mini Dum Dum of the Week. So yesterday, I was covering some water polo, some high school girls water polo, and before I left, I saw my umbrella still in my backpack, and I said, well, I don't need this. It hasn't rained ever since last Saturday, so I will just take it out of my backpack, and I won't need it. So that was the good idea, right? I freed up some space in my backpack, and now I am all good to go. Well, little did I know, I actually needed that umbrella just because it was like the fourth quarter of the game, and it started to rain. And guess who didn't have his umbrella? I didn't. And guess who took a jacket that didn't have a hood? I did. So I give myself the mini Dum Dum of the Week. I don't even think it's a dumb thing, just because I didn't need an umbrella, just because the past 3 days, I have not seen rain. So I was thinking, okay, it's probably not going to rain anytime soon. And I even checked the weather report in Newport Beach. It wasn't going to rain. And then I saw a few raindrops beforehand, and then I'm thinking, oh, please don't rain. And then, unfortunately, it did rain, which really sucked. So, in my defense, again, the weather report lied to me. The weather app, you lied to me when you said that it wasn't going to rain in Newport Beach at 4 p.m. or later. But unfortunately, I didn't have my umbrella. I wasn't really properly dressed to combat the rain. So, unfortunately, I take the mini Dum Dum of the Week. Long story short, just pack an umbrella just to be safe. Just because we're still in wintertime. So, yeah, I'll gladly take the mini Dum Dum of the Week. But again, it could have been a whole lot worse. But as for the main Dum Dum of the Week, okay, so there was a whole lot of dumb things that happened. But for this Dum Dum of the Week award segment, it's going to be all Chargers. Just because I still have an axe to grind when it comes to them. So obviously we have to go with the worst of the main evils, the Joey Bosa situation. So in Joey Bosa's defense, he was getting held and he was playing on half a leg, but there is no excuse for him to throw his helmet onto the field, which eventually drew a flag, which moved the Jaguars to the 1-yard line for the 2-point conversion, which they converted, which eventually mattered. And I even told a few of my buddies, having Joey Bosa back was big time right there. I only wish it could have been for the whole game. It could have been big time for the whole game. But unfortunately, Joey Bosa threw a hissy fit. He let his emotions get the better of him. And he kind of cost the Chargers the game. So, unfortunately for him, he should know better just because he's a veteran player. And he's not like a true experienced player, but he knows that a unsportsmanlike penalty is the last thing the Chargers want to accumulate. Just because in a game like this, where it's now a 4, soon-to-be 3-point game. He now costs his team, which the Jaguars eventually got the 2-point conversion, and now it's a 2-point game. So the Jaguars just need to go down the field and get the field goal as opposed to getting the touchdown to win. So Joey Bosa gets the first dum-dum of the week. So, Bosa, I'm sorry to do this to you. I like you and all, but you kind of deserve this dum-dum of the week, part 1.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
So that's the first dum-dum of the week. So dum-dum of the week number 2, Brandon Staley. Brandon. The man who decided to play Mike Williams in Week 18, he got hurt. He eventually was out. He also played Bosa. He minorly got hurt. It wound up biting him in the butt, which eventually saw him playing on half a leg, according to Bosa. It's not just that. It gets much worse with Brandon Staley. So a reporter decided to ask Brandon Staley if he got outcoached by Doug Peterson in the second half. Brandon Staley's response was, no, it didn't look like it. You were outcoached. You cannot just say, I wasn't outcoached in the second half. Of course you were outcoached. You got outscored 24-3 in the second half. There is no excuse. I don't want to hear the excuses. You are basically I wouldn't say the most inexperienced coach. You've had some experience, but you are the most inexperienced head coach out there. Dougie Peterson has a Super Bowl ring. The dude took Nick Foles and won a Super Bowl. You have boatloads of talent, which you decided to piss away and play in Week 18, which saw a few of your guys neither not 100% or ruled out due to injury. But you cannot just say, I did not get outcoached. You got outcoached, buddy. You have to admit it. Because Doug Peterson's experience level when it comes to you and he in terms of NFL coaching is way up on the top of the Empire State Building, all the way down to floor number 1. So, Brandon Staley, for your ignorance, for you playing your starters, you're still getting dum-dum of the week. And this is going to be the second week you're getting dum-dum of the week, and I don't care. You better hope you don't make any dumb decisions, because if you do, you will be back on this segment. So, Brandon Staley, you're getting dum-dum of the week, numero dos.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
And then we have dum-dum of the week number 3. Dean Spanos, the owner of the Chargers. So, he was the guy that brought Brandon Staley on. Now, I guess maybe Tom Telesco, but oh boy. You want to know who the Chargers could have also had after they gave Anthony Lynn his walking papers? Brian Dable, he was available. Doug Peterson, he was available. Guess what those two have in common that Brandon Staley doesn't have? A playoff win this year. Peterson took the Jaguars and beat the Chargers, and Brian Dable took the New York Giants and beat the Minnesota Vikings. And guess what happened? Guess who the Chargers could have had? Brian Dable and Doug Peterson. Guess who they decided to settle on? Brandon Staley. Dean Spanos wanted to be just like the LA Rams. He decided to say, well, let's be like the LA Rams because defensive-minded coach. He had success with the Rams. He's still in LA. Yoink! But no. And he could have had Brian Dable. He could have had Doug Peterson. But nope. Dean Spanos decided to go with Brandon Staley over having Brian Dable, who groomed Josh Allen to being one of the best quarterbacks, or to being one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And also, he could have had Doug Peterson. Now, at the time, I thought Doug Peterson wouldn't have been a good hire just because Peterson led the Eagles to a very, very bad record. But looking back at it, Doug Peterson has a lot of experience. I would have preferred at this point now, I'm thinking Doug Peterson should have been hired by the Chargers. And look at what Doug Peterson's done with the Jaguars. He has single-handedly revived Trevor Lawrence's career. And this dude has the Jaguars one win away from the AFC Championship game. Unfortunately for Dean Spanos, the dude did not go down the route. He decided to be cheap and try to copy and paste the LA Rams. But unfortunately, that is not the case. And because of Dean Spanos and whoever else made the decision to hire Brandon Staley over Brian Dable, over Doug Peterson, you are also this week's Dumb of the Week.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
And before I get on into the final Dumb of the Week, Marcus says Doug Peterson should not have been fired by Philly. I agree. And Marcus says that Dean Spanos should hire the Bucs' old offensive coordinator. Basically, he's referring to Byron Leftwich. That's his name, Byron Leftwich. No, Marcus, we are not hiring Byron Leftwich. I'd rather take Greg Roman, but that's just me being dry. I don't think Leftwich would be just as better than Joe Lombardi. But it's a stretch. But now for the Dumb of the Week, it has to go to the Chargers. They blew a 27-point lead, and the only ones who are excluded from this award is Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Gerald Everett, who had over 100 receiving yards, Asante Samuel Jr., who played out of his mind, Drew Tranquill, who had an interception, and many. There are probably like others that I feel bad for. I mean, I guess maybe Mike Williams is excluded from this list, and anyone, I guess, that had a standout game or that doesn't really deserve to blame, or that I just recently mentioned, they don't deserve Dumb of the Week. But for the rest of the Chargers that was involved in blowing a 27-point lead, which was basically 27-0, you got to be Dumb of the Week. It just doesn't make sense. And this one probably mainly goes to Joe Lombardi, just because Lombardi, sadly, wasn't utilizing Austin Eckler. Again, the Chargers had 7 rushing yards in the second half off of 7 designed carries. That is basically criminal right there. Joe Lombardi should be arrested for poor offensive coordinator. And I think Joe Lombardi deserves Dumb of the Week. So forget what I said about the Chargers as a whole being Dumb of the Week. Joe Lombardi is the Dumb of the Week just because he has criminal offensive play. He had criminal offensive play calling in the second half. The dude basically did not use Austin Eckler. He didn't drain the clock. He didn't use the clock to his advantage. Basically, he did everything except win the game for the Chargers last week in the second half. So there's no defending it. And I am glad Joe Lombardi has been shown his walking papers and the door. And I hope that door does not hit him on the way out. So for Joe Lombardi, I'm glad you are gone. And you are this week's Dumb of the Week award, numero 4.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
Talk to him again. Talk to him again, my dude.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
And that, my friends, is all she wrote. I'm warning you, Chargers, don't test me like that again. I promise y'all, I am not in the mood to be playing with anybody. Yes, I quoted Stephen A. Smith, but I don't care. This weekend is going to be completely horrible in terms of watching the NFL. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Before I lose my voice, it is that time, ladies and gentlemen, for me to get on out of here. Because we have another show coming on in about, let's say, 2 minutes and 15 seconds from now. Ya dig? Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen in a car, on a plane, with a goat on a train, I really do appreciate you. If you you listen in the wee hours in the morning, I definitely appreciate you. Shout out to the chat room, Marcus Los Great, Davidson Crooks, and Larry B for popping in. I really do appreciate you tuning in. It made the show go a lot better just because obviously this was the most difficult SoCal Supreme Sports Show I've done in my 120 episodes of doing this. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. You all have yourself a great weekend. Even if the Chargers or Rams aren't playing, enjoy the NFL. Even though there's no more college football, enjoy college basketball. I will see you all on Monday afternoon for Set Point. Until then, have a great weekend, and remember, SoCal is for SoCal. Peace!